You're listening to Arsenal Pass, a flesh and blood podcast for players by players. And all about strategy, leveling up, and the latest news in the world of Wraith. Welcome to Arsenal Pass.
Brendan, it's been a big week in Flesh and Blood for previews, early previews. We've just seen new Prism Advent of Thrones, and also Vincent. Your first, I guess, thoughts on the flood of cards we've seen this week. Are you going to be back to your Shadow Runeblade roots, or are you going to be, continuing as a wizard main?
Nah, honestly, Vincent looks like ass. I'm sorry. I'm just going to say it. But I definitely empathize with the actual design, like the design team that went behind it, where it's like, I think this is a good middle ground. Just if you're looking for Chain 2.0, this is not that. Like Chain, a big part of Chain was the go again. It's not necessarily the blood debt, and this isn't even doing nearly as crazy stuff when it comes to blood debt. Do I think it will be a cool hero, a unique way to engage with Shadow Runeblade cards? Yeah, for sure. But this is not going to give you that Chain feeling, I don't think, unless we see some crazy supporting cards. Even then, I would be surprised, because what made Chain so powerful and consistent and feel like Chain was it was on the hero ability. You didn't have to draw the card. It was just there. So yeah, I don't think Vincent's pulling me back over to Shadow Runeblade. Prism, on the other hand, I mean, at least it looks cool. I think that I'm just not sure about where the actualization of this card comes and like what it will mean for the future. But I'm definitely much more excited about Prism than I am about Vincent. One thing I will say is that anytime I see a life total less than the standard 20 or 40 on a hero, it gets me excited. Your thoughts, Hayden?
Yeah, I mean, Prism Advent of Thrones 16, adult will be 32. It's interesting because Prism obviously because we have a young Prism, this has a different naming convention, right? So we'll also see the adult Prism with a different naming convention, which is quite interesting. The first time I've kind of seen that, I had that conundrum, which is quite cool. So, and then Vincent, of course, as well. We'll see an adult version. I mean, 16 health on Prism Advent of Thrones. We'll just kind of intro the show with a little bit of chat about Dust to Dawn, because we did see not only these two heroes, but a couple of more specs come out over the week, which is really interesting. I think from Prism side of things, I mean, the idea of this like card with a herald name is put into your soul, then you message your deck for a Figment, and then also you can once per turn pay the 2 to banish a card from your soul and awaken a Figment. The assumption, I guess, at this moment in time is the Figments are the setup reverse side of what the allies will be. These will be the new way to, you get a Figment into play, and then you activate that Figment, which becomes your ally. So that, I think that's quite a cool gameplay pattern. It's very different to what we've seen with Prism, original Prism, and different even again to Dromai. It's kind of actually feels like somewhere in between that a little bit. You get these kind of onboard permanents that kind of reminiscent a little bit of auras, but then also in a way, it's allies. They're like the dragons. So and you can potentially, it's once per turn instant, of course. You can only activate one per turn, but you can potentially get multiple on the board to start to set up. We don't know what the Figments look like yet. Can you attack them? Can you destroy them before they get awakened? We don't know, but what we do know is that it looks cool. At least I know. I think it looks cool.
I mean, 16 is really low as well. Like 16 is really, because that puts you at 32. Which if you guys want to don't know the Kano math, that means dead from turn 0. But I mean that is almost Kano level like hell. So it points to there being something really fun you can do with this hero, to be honest. So that's genuinely what gets me excited. Just want to quickly touch week on Flesh and Blood. It's pretty obvious. Hayden went to the Calling Singapore, top 8'd. Did very well. Hayden, I just want to get a super high level view, but I want to hear your experience. Like, how was it? Did you have a great time? Singapore visiting once again. Like, what did it feel like going back to Singapore? And was like, is this the actualization of what Fab is supposed to be? Right? You're playing the game. You're seeing the world. Just dive into your weekend just a little bit here.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, this is just, I guess, quickly, episode 114. We're calling it How to Win a Calling. We've got Nick Butcher, who is the calling champion of Singapore, joining us for the main topic of the pod. But also, I was there in Singapore, and I thought, I could just give a bit of a recap of the event, like you said, Brendan. I had an awesome time. I mean, Singapore. This is my second time to Singapore for Flesh and Blood. I went to the calling last year on the way to Pro Tour Lille. I had, like I say, just an awesome time. It's such a cool city. If you haven't been to Singapore before, all of the kind of, I think these major Asian cities, especially in Southeast Asia, they just have such cool atmospheres. They are very unique. They have a lot of history to them, especially Singapore. So, food, amazing, kind of views and sights, amazing. The weather, so. It's right on the equator, right? So it's really hot. It's very humid. Pretty lucky it's coming into wet season, I guess. We didn't get hit with much rain only on the last day, and it wasn't actually too crazy humid, which was nice. Last time we were there, it was actually a lot hotter. So this time, which is about 11 months difference, was a little bit easier to bear with. Just to set the scene for Calling Singapore, it was 288 players. I think they had a cap of 300. So I thought it might have been a little bit bigger, to be honest. But I think Singapore is a little bit less accessible from a financial standpoint. It's quite an expensive city comparative to some of the other cities in Asia. So I think that kind of limits it a little bit. But there was a lot of travelers there, a lot of locals, of course, a lot of players from, likes of Taiwan, Hong Kong, Malaysia. There was an Indonesian crew, which was really cool to see. The game has really grown in Indonesia over the past year. I played against an Indonesian player in one round. The event itself, Friday, there was like this big challenge, the Monarch event, which James White played in. It was a Monarch sealed. And I actually got to, Brendan, you'll appreciate this. I got to speak to James on Sunday after top 8. And James said to me, he was like, I'm really excited for some of these limited sets coming up. I'm really excited for people to be drafting Monarch again. I tell you what, I wasn't excited to be playing Monarch Sealed again. James said he thinks it's his least favorite sealed format in all Flesh and Blood, so that was quite funny. But it was a cool event.
Likes Arcane Rising more? That begs the question. I mean, that is quite the statement. You can't just say that. We pass right over. I mean, there is a real shit sealed format lurking in the second set of Flesh and Blood. I think.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I didn't call him out on that one, but yeah, that was cool as well. I got to have a great chat with James. He didn't drop any hints or anything to me. I mean, the main thing we kind of talked about was just kind of the sets coming up. And one thing that he did sort of say that I really took away is that he sees Flesh and Blood as this kind of ebb and flow of mechanics and power. So maybe power is not quite the right word, but just kind of, what these sets stand for, So he really was saying he thinks Outsiders and Dynasty was really back to nuts and bolts, Flesh and Blood. Uprising was this really different, really unique set, right, with a lot of design principles we hadn't seen in games before, let alone Flesh and Blood, with the invocations and the tokens as playable equipment in the packs, things like that. He said, the next set, Dust of Dawn, and then in the next limited set, I think people are really in for more of that. He said with the set coming at the end of the year, we're going to see something that people have never seen in TCGs before. So that's it's really interesting.
Serialized lottery animated cards. No, I'm kidding. He actually said that
they come to life in your hand.
Yeah, he actually said that at the Pro Tour, by the way. He did a little presentation. He talked about the ebb and flow of power in sets, how some sets were very exciting and had huge impact, and some sets did not. And I remember someone immediately came up to me after that and was like, "So does that mean Dust of Dawn's going to be a bad set?" Because he was like, "Yeah, it's going to be this ebb and flow." And he drew, there was like this little line. He was like, "Okay, well, what does that mean for the future?" Because usually, they always try to be up.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, James just a great ambassador for his own game. He's extremely passionate, and most people will have that takeaway if you're able to talk to him at a major event, which I highly recommend as well.
Yeah.
So Hayden,
he was out there taking photos and chatting with people, and made sure to speak with players who maybe didn't get that opportunity, who were still playing the event, things like that. He tried to seek them out as well. He did a draft on Sunday where he went around and found a few players that I think it was a mix of players he wanted to have a draft with. He actually did, he was like, "Do you want to draft?" And I was like, I ended up commentating the final, so I was on coverage for the final. I said, "James, I'd love to, but I got to do coverage for the final." But I ended up having to wait 2 hours for the semi-final to finish, so maybe I could have got that draft in.
Yeah. I heard that you were telling me he talked to you right after your loss as well, right?
Yeah. James came in with the highest of energy, and I was maybe a little bit lower on the energy front after losing my quarterfinal match, but no, it was still a great conversation.
It happened to me in Dallas. As soon as I lost my match, like, "Hey, can we interview you for your top 8?" I was like, "What?" Just lost. How do you feel? I was like, "Terrible." Yeah,
awful. Yeah, I got to... for those that don't know, if you didn't catch any of the coverage of the Calling Singapore over the weekend, I myself made top 8 playing Oldhim, my friend and eventual winner Nick Butcher on Oldhim as well, and also his friend and former testing partner Matt was also on the same basically the same list of Oldhim. The three of us were, ran well enough to make top 8 on this kind of 80 card list. We'll talk about it with Nick in the main topic of the pod. But my event overall, I felt, Brendan, you asked me last week, how on a scale of 1 to 10, how do I feel about the event? I think, preparation wise, I think I said a 7, and then I messaged you afterwards and said, I tweeted on Twitter, I think I said, I'm an 8. I'm actually an 8. And by the time we got to Friday, I felt like a 9.5. I felt really prepared for the event. I felt really good. And I honestly like playing my matches on Saturday, Sunday. I started day 1. I went 6-1. My only loss on day 1 was actually on my feature match. Typical. Got the Brendan curse. I got my feature match in round 5.
Excuse me? No. Last time I was on feature, I won. I believe I've won a match.
Did you?
Yeah, I've won.
Okay.
So I actually broke the curse a while ago. It's just
you did. I know you
pesky narratives,
Well, I think I'm running sub 500, I think, on my feature matches, to be honest. I got 3 at Worlds, I think. I did win 2 of those, actually, but infamously, my last match on camera in a high-level event before this one was Reiner dumpstering me in the last round of World Championships. Love that match. I'm sure you do.
My favorite match.
So I lost to Icelander in round 5, another one of the top 8 competitors. There were 5 Australians in the top 8 of this calling, Brendan. I think about 15 or 16 travelled of the near 300 players in the event, and 5 made it to top 8. So, all these people saying Apex dead region, they might be right about New Zealand, to be fair.
Yeah. I mean,
not Australia, though.
Okay, yeah, because, New Zealand, small island nation, really hasn't been able to compete. No, I mean, it's definitely a great showing for you guys down there. I know some Americans flew over, maybe. I'm going to have to take a mulligan on this one, but, scoreboard, baby, PT.
Brody was top 16. Brody had a great event as well. I think Brody also finished. So I finished, day 1 at X1, 6-1. I think Brody finished the same. I think he was 1 place above me or something. I think took a loss to the locals. Really put on a good performance as well. So people from the SEA. So the Hong Kong team and the Taiwanese team separately came with like quite interesting Lexi lists. So the Hong Kong team played 3 Remembrance. They're on this like shuffle back battering bolts and 3 of a kinds to fatigue the Oldhims, which is super interesting. I know Matt paired into Alan Lau, who is a just notorious top 16er at this point of PT's world champs. Again, top 16 at this calling this weekend, missed out on top 8 after starting the day 1 at 7-0. Alan will break that curse at some point, I know, and make a top 8. He's an amazing player. And then Paitang also playing this Taiwanese list, world's top 4 competitor, making the finals of the calling as well. So yeah, overall event was awesome. Day 2, I had to play against Matt Rodgers in round 1. It's something about Gem, honestly, pairs you against the same people. I've traveled to so many callings, and I've played Matt in every single one of them basically on day 2, and almost always in round 8 as well, or round 8 or 9. He's knocked me out of a lot of callings. Luckily on this one, we played last time in Auckland, we played in Orlando. We've just played a lot of times. Luckily this time I took the loss, went to X2, but then won out and made top 8, finishing in second seed, and then pairing into, unfortunately, Nick in the quarterfinals, where we played on day 1 in an Ultimate Mirror. I won that one. He got his revenge in the top 8, and then of course, rest is history. We went on to grab the trophy.
That's the time to do it. Well, Hayden, we had some Premier Play announcements. Very exciting stuff. I know people are really eager to hear what the World Championships is. Do you want to relay some of that news?
You should have heard the reception at the calling. So they dropped this article.
Again? Oh my god.
No.
They didn't do it publicly. Yeah, because he did that.
They
did that
say
in PT,
anything,
by the way, where they literally had a slideshow. It was like, and the World Championships is to be decided,
to be confirmed. Yeah. No, so they dropped this article, must have been about the last round of the Monarch Sealed event. So everyone was in the hall. I have a feeling James might have ducked out by this point. Maybe he was still there playing the last round of Sealed, but they dropped this article, and people were like, oh, there's, people were like Premier players, people had their phones out and stuff. And then I'm like, oh, where's Worlds? Well, the Premier Play announcement doesn't mention Worlds, but there's 2 more callings confirmed for the end of the year and a slew of Battle Hardens. So it was pretty funny just hearing people's response. Obviously, people were excited because we were in Singapore and neighboring country Taiwan. There's a calling Taipei coming up, so people were excited about that. But it didn't mask the kind of disappointment of not knowing when and where Worlds is, unfortunately. But just onto this Premier Play announcement quickly, because it's super exciting. Brendan, you have a calling coming up in your home city, Dallas, Texas is going to be hosting a calling in October. The week before that is going to be the calling in Taipei in Taiwan. So yeah, two callings, both class constructed, I believe. Yeah, both class constructed, happening in October, post national season, but before the enigma that is Worlds. So yeah, very exciting.
Yep, for sure. I think that Dallas is a great location. I actually do think it's an absolute.
It's one of the largest cities in the world.
It is statistically, it is, bro. But it's also a major international hub, so it's very easy to travel to. It's relatively cheap, and I don't know, it's a good place if you wanna hang out and do stuff. There's literally two cities right next to each other, Dallas and Fort Worth. So hopefully we bring it back. Yeah. On top of that, we're nearly at 6,000 subscribers. We're not quite there yet, so please, if you're listening to this, help us out. Hit us with that subscribe, and go ahead and hit a like on the video too, if you'd be so kind. But it'd be a huge achievement for us, so help us get there. Hayden, what's next here?
Yeah, I mean, just in terms of events and things like that, obviously this Premier Play announcement starts to paint a bit of a picture for the second half of the year. There's a lot happening in Flesh and Blood. I know we've had a lot of. Previously, I think last year, there was complaints about the kind of run rate or the rate of events. There was a lot of events at one time, and then there was some downtime. And I think some people felt burnt out. Some people felt like there wasn't enough events in the right places at the right time. I will say with the announcement of all these Battle Hardens, there was 7 Battle Hardens announced with this announcement over the weekend. There's Florence, Tokyo, Toulouse, Milwaukee, Warsaw, Kuala Lumpur, and St. Louis. I think, is that how you say it? Is it St. Louis?
Is this in America?
Yeah.
St. Louis.
St. Louis? Oh, man.
Yeah, like the French
America.
say, St. Louis. Okay. Yeah, definitely the French would not say it like that.
Anyway, so those are happening. What I was saying before I got annoyed about that is I think Battle Hardens and strategic placements of callings are giving people a lot more access to events, which is super cool. I mean, we've got events happening in, Brazil, Japan, France and Toulouse, Florence and Italy. Like that is very exciting. Plus these callings happening as well. And we've got some, I believe, there's at least one more calling to be announced. There's a calling ode to Australia sometime at the end of this year as well. In terms of what's happening next, Battle Hard in Baltimore is on this coming weekend. That's the teams event that we talked about. There is also LA the weekend after, which is class constructed. That'll be the last hurrah before we get to Dust of Dawn. And then, of course, we launch into War of the Monarch with these pre-release events, basically, where you can win some of these promos. And then we head to Dust of Dawn pre-release. And then we've got Skirmish Season 7 before we get into National Season. So it's going to, events are coming fast, but I think there's enough in the right sort of events that people can decide what they do and do not want to play.
Yeah, and I spoke to both Chris Pierce and James White at the Pro Tour in Baltimore. And I said, can you please give us a freaking reason to go back to New Zealand? They said they are going to do that very soon. So I don't know what that is, but hopefully that's on the menu here for late 2023, at least early 2024. Because that, for the people listening, and I know a lot of you listening are going to fall into this category. If you haven't been to New Zealand, it is a spectacular and beautiful country to visit.
Just make sure you get to the South Island if you're going to be there. No. If you're going to go to New Zealand, take the time to go to the South Island. It's infinitely better than the North Island.
Yes, that is what the local people will tell you. And I unfortunately did not make it to the South Island last time, and I definitely will. There's also a restaurant. If you're if you're listening to Arsenal Pass, you've heard about this goddamn restaurant. It's called Pasture. Check it out. It's in Auckland. It's amazing.
Everyone on the show this week has been to Pasture.
I know, we got an affiliate code. It's Arsenal Pass P.
We should have one. Honestly. Ridiculous.
Do you imagine a restaurant like that?
Yeah, I want my 10% from them. I'll tell you what. The prices they charge. No, in this economy.
Well, speaking of Pasture, into the Commander Cookout, which we have none, but if you want to get your question read out on the podcast, go ahead and shoot us a comment on YouTube, or you can email us at arsenalpassfab.com, or find us at an event, maybe an event.
arsenalpass@gmail.com.
Arsenalpass
at gmail.com.
At gmail.com.
Yeah.
Or maybe you can find us at the World Championships, wherever the hell that is, and give us a little note and we'll read it out. But there is no Commander Cookout because we have calling champion Nick Butcher joining us to talk about what it takes to win a calling. All right, and on to the main topic, and we're joined by Mr. Nick Butcher, 2022 Australian national champion, now 4-time calling top 8 competitor, Sydney 2019 and 2022, Auckland 2020, Singapore 2023, and winner, multiple PT competitor. I was just complaining to Hayden about this, that, I had to read out so many accolades for Mr. Nick Butcher here because he's been doing so well recently. First off, Nick, I just want to say congratulations on your success in Singapore here recently, and thank you so much for coming onto the podcast. How are you doing? How are you feeling about Flesh and Blood right now off the back of your win and the future of this game and sort of your career in it? Are you feeling good? You feeling jazzed after that dub?
Yeah, I mean, thanks for having me. Arsenal Pass, the great podcast, number one. Check them out on Spotify. Yeah, I just feel good. Like, it's just fun. I just enjoy playing. Like, that's the most important part, right? You get to travel overseas. The game is like the secondary, and then you get to travel with your friends, hang out with them, go to all different kinds of places. I think everyone should, go give it a shot, even if they think they're not going to win. Even though I did think I was going to win, but yeah, I just want to keep playing. Next set's coming out. There's new spoilers. Everything's looking good.
Yeah,
every card's getting a specialization, it seems.
Yeah, it's cool to talk to the players that are actualizing this sort of mantra behind Flesh and Blood of play the game, see the world. It genuinely can be something. It's something that you can achieve and something you can do. And one of my favorite things about Flesh and Blood right now, Nick, I want to ask you because I guess at this point you are known as an Oldhim player. I don't know if you feel like you're an Oldhim player, but you've definitely seen some success on the deck recently, and now you've won the most recent calling with it in Singapore. So can you just give us a little bit of a background on why you chose to bring Oldhim to this tournament?
I don't feel I'm an Oldhim player. I just play what I think's the best. Like, I thought Dash would be the best in Pro Tour too, so I took it, and unfortunately won the weekend before and was too late to pivot to something else. So people got prepared for it, unfortunately. But I just thought this weekend I think it's the best deck. Like, it's so strong. It maneuvers itself so well against every deck, and there's a power in if someone says to you, "Oh, what's your win condition against this particular deck?" If your response to most of the field is, "I don't need to win. My opponent needs to win," there's a power in that where you have to have a win con against me, but I don't need to have a win con against you because you'll always fatigue against me. It's just too. I think it's really, really strong, and now I'm glad it's gone.
Why do you think? So Oldhim obviously won the Pro Tour, which is a pretty big achievement. But why do you think we didn't see more success out of Oldhim at the Pro Tour? It seemed like it was a deck that started to fly a little bit under the radar, and even post Pro Tour, maybe not in your neck of the woods, maybe not in APAC and in Europe, but at least in the United States, it felt like it still didn't get enough respect after the Pro Tour. People were still talking about Lexi. People were still talking about Jeremiah coming back. Why is Oldhim this deck that seemingly is the categorical best deck in most people's mind, but just gets disrespected? It almost feels like.
It's hard to say, to be honest. Like, everyone at Pro Tour everyone after Pro Tour blew off the deck I posted on Twitter until Pablo won with it, and then all of a sudden, wow, this deck's so good, right? I think it has to win an event to get the shining light, and then people adapt to it. People adapt as well. Like, you see all the Lexis now running all these remembrances for the fatigue deck and battering bolt, all these things, like, and they've got their strategies for like their late game combo where they'll remembrance or quiver and then out of war draw whatever they want, and then that's how they'll get you. So I think it's all about adapting, and people adapt to Oldhim instead of switching to Oldhim because they just like what they like, and Oldhim's a really hard deck to pick up and play.
I think there's a couple of other nuances as well, right, Brendan? Because the PT is split format. And, someone like Nick, you went X1 in CC. I know some others that played Oldhim, even that you had sort of the Canadians that you were working with, they went with X1, quite solid records as well. Yeah. So, I do think there's a part of it is that. The other thing that I've kind of noticed as well, and something that I know we talked about, Nick, kind of before the weekend, is that people get stuck in sort of philosophies about what Oldhim should or shouldn't be. You talked about the kind of adaptation of the Lexis that we saw over the weekend. Brendan, I don't know if you know about this, but the Hong Kong guys came with this really good plan into what is the fatigue matchup as a Lexi, basically where they were fatiguing Oldhims. And I think people just on the flip side of that maybe didn't have plans to counteract that. People are thinking, oh, my Oldhim deck does X, it can only fatigue, whereas, we saw Nick in the final just slap his opponent with multiple on-hit effects to stop that from happening. So, I think there's a lot of different reasons why people have kind of felt that way.
Yeah, so you both played a pretty similar list. Hayden, can you break down for me at a high level what it is your Oldhim list is trying to do and sort of the core strategy behind the deck? We talk about Oldhim there being a bit of a dichotomy between both the theory behind the deck and the ways it's been built. Maybe some people are building for fatigue, some people are building for tempo or aggro. or there's other decks that just do both the best, which I guess is kind of what your deck is doing. Just talk to me about your list specifically and what it was doing that's better than what other people are doing. Maybe other people showed up with Oldhim to the tournament, which I know, recent Pro Tour champion Michael Fang was also on Oldhim.
Yeah, and top 8 competitor Brody Spurlock as well there on Oldhim as well. They both came with their version of Oldhim. I think Nick can do this better. I think the one thing I'll say before I hand over to Nick, because I think Nick has the philosophy behind this deck kind of nailed and can articulate it a little bit better, is that I think the list in particular that we played had the ability to do what Nick said before, which is, our opponents need ways to beat us, but then also had this ability to pivot into a deck that had a lot of answers to the proactive decks in the format. I want to shout out Red Disable as maybe one of the best cards in the weekend in the deck. I know Nick and Matt ended up playing 3 Red Disable. I only played 2. I wish I played 3. But yeah, like things like that, this ability to disrupt your opponent and also not only you're kind of asking questions in 2 different ways is the kind of the way I saw it. You're asking the question of how do you beat me, and then the second is you ask questions with on-hit effects. But I'll throw it to Nick. I think maybe Nick can articulate it a little bit better, kind of his thoughts.
I forgot what the question was.
Yeah, so it's okay. It's okay.
Sorry, Dave.
I was about to.
Sorry, Dave.
I was about to redo it anyway. The question is just sort of the high level strategy of your Oldhim deck. What is it trying to do, and also highlight how it differentiates from other Oldhim decks that were maybe brought on the weekend.
Yeah. So it's mainly just trying to play all of its cards as often as possible. So they have cards like Sigil of Solace and everything that can always be played. That's become a standard at this point, but we wanted to add more on hits to the deck because Lexi obviously is going to adapt, and that's why the other Oldhim decks didn't succeed, I don't think, because they didn't adapt to the Lexi adaptations. So I wanted more on hits in the deck, so that's why we had 3 Disable, 3 CNC, 3 Spinal, and Chokeslam. That's just a lot of on hits for the deck. And another thing that we made our deck a lot better is we don't play any 10s at all or any Pulverize, and the reason for that is 10 damage is just 10 damage. Like you play against an aggro deck, they just have better output than you. And in the mirror, I actually found that when I was playing Spinal Crush, because I always have 1 floating and Van Brace, they're not able to use Tunic plus Crown of Seeds to draw a card and pretty much gain a life for free. So it just basically became the exact same thing as just playing another 9 and having a good on hit. And then also disrupts their Rouse the Ancients play when they set an Arsenal, which is also really strong. And the main reason is because we found we weren't using Tunic that often, we just want more pummel targets. So if you can just remove a Tunic counter and just pummel a Disable or pummel Spinal, pummel CNC is the best play in the game right now, maybe besides 3 of a kind Rain Razors, the feature. So it's a no-brainer, I think. Once you come to figure out that Van Brace just becomes like the center point in the mirror match, and that makes all your other matchups better. And then that's what pretty much made all 3 of us that played the deck make it to top 8.
Yeah.
So between yourself, Hayden, and Matt Rodgers, you guys played almost an identical list. Did you all test together in preparation for this tournament?
I tested a lot with Hayden and Matt, and I bounced ideas between the 2 of them. I don't think Matt and Hayden played, but and pretty much it just works out that way where I can get ideas from both of them and then source data, because people play differently. People have different ideologies. Yeah. And if I bounce both ideas off both of them, I can create, a center point of ideas and then just change things slightly, get all different kinds of philosophies out. So, yeah. It actually worked out really good that way.
3 for 3 in the top 8. It just leads me to the question of do you think that this group of players' competitive edge lies mostly in sort of the gameplay and the philosophy behind the hero, or actually just in the list specifically? Where are you all getting your edge to where you're able to show up to a major tournament like this in Singapore and go 3 for 3 to top 8 and actually win the tournament?
Hayden take it because he's a newer Oldhim player. He's a newer Oldhim player, so he'd probably be able to speak of it a lot better than me.
Yeah, I think I have a pretty firm thought on this. I think it's both, to be honest. Honestly, I think Nick talked about the merits of the list we had and making sure. I mean, the Nick is the brain behind this list in a big way. In terms of a lot of Disable, for instance, the ability to pivot, to have this answer to Lexi's answer, for instance. I felt so prepared for every match I walked into this past weekend. I felt like we had great plans, but also I think the point I think that illustrates it the best is playing the mirror in Swiss. So I actually played Nick and Matt in Swiss, played 2 mirrors, and then also played Nick again in top 8. And I played 2 other Oldhim mirrors against players from local players, and I think another player from overseas. And the polar kind of comparison between the mirrors, because of the list and the ideology, it was so contrasting to me. I'd only really played the mirror against Nick in testing. I just got reps against Nick in the mirror, and we're both playing, these what we felt were optimized lists, and then playing against sort of some of the lists that were more traditional, maybe some of the styles that we'd seen at the Pro Tour. The matchup just felt so different. Nick talked about a key thing about, Rouse the Ancients turns. Things like Disable and Pummels and Pummel CNC hold your opponent down from, or even Spinal Crush, Chokeslam, hold your opponent down from being able to play Rouse the Ancients. One of the hardest things I was thinking in the mirror is like, I got to get my Rouse the Ancient turns off. They're so hard to get off. But that was more a symptom of our deck. When I played against the other Oldhims, it was super easy to get my Rouse the Ancient turns off and got so far ahead because of it. So I think that's partly deck building, but then also partly philosophy of how to play the game, because I think we had quite good plans. We all sat down the day before the event. We discussed our plans into the matchups. We all had some different ideas. I think, Nick and Matt, being the more experienced, had some really good ideas into matchups that maybe I hadn't played, for example. So a bit of both, I think.
Mm-hmm. Well, so I know Oldhim is heading into to a living legend here pretty soon, right? Won't be playable. I want to get some sort of timeless information out of this. Let's talk a bit more about your preparation. How does a group of players prepare for a tournament like a Calling in Singapore and perform so well? Just bring me into your process and try to highlight on some things that we can extrapolate to future tournaments. Agnostic of hero.
I'll start. It's because it's way better to test with multiple different groups. Don't say to yourself, I have my two friends and we're going to keep all of our secrets and we're not going to tell anyone and our deck is so good. And then you're just like, then you get really short-sighted and then you don't get the ideas of other people. Like it's a group effort and you can test with multiple groups. And I don't think it's going to lower your percentage chance. To be honest, I think you're going to get ideas from them because you don't know whether your deck is even that great. You play against another testing team's group, like say you play against Blue Pitch in a test game, and then your Oldhim deck or whatever deck that you play gets mopped by whatever they're playing because they're just a level ahead of you. And it just helps everyone. And the same could be the same for them. Say another team comes to you and then you beat on them and they're just like, oh man, it works both ways. So I think that you can get great ideas from multiple testing groups.
Yeah, I think especially in modern day Flesh and Blood, like I genuinely agree with that advice as well. I think there was maybe a time in the past when smaller testing groups and more hidden information could have been more beneficial, but with players being so good at the game at this point, just having the diversity of ideas and putting your ideas through the most rigorous testing process, cross-pollinating with other groups is just, it seems to be the best way to go. We see the best players in the world tend to follow that process at this point. Hayden, anything you want to highlight?
It was so evident at Pro Tour where everyone's like, oh, Lexi's the best deck, but we're not going to tell anyone. And then Lexi just became super popular and everyone's like, oh, wow, we all knew that. And then it's the same with Anathos Vambrace. All the testing groups had Anathos Vambrace, but every group was like, we can't show anyone our hidden technology. It was just really funny.
Yeah, I think the big thing, Brendan, just to Nick's point, like you said before, you talked about philosophy versus deck list. And I think that's a big part of what Nick is highlighting, kind of what you can gain from testing wide as opposed to narrow, is that, at the end of the day, your deck list could get out there. Some people might find some of the cards that you're on. But honestly, especially with the deck like Oldhim, the philosophy and the way you play and the style of play and the way you decide to play into matchups is so important. And that's not restricted to just Oldhim. That is something that is true across a lot of heroes in this game and will continue to be true across a lot of heroes and formats in this game. A deck list is only a part of it. It's not like other games. I tested for big Magic events before where it was, you wanted to keep things secret because if lists got out there, a lot of decks sometimes play themselves. Once kind of the philosophy of how to play the deck, pretty simple top line, you can get results. It's not the same in Fab, especially with a lot of these games that go longer. Where you have to have an earlier, mid, and a late game plan, and maybe you have to pivot. Maybe there's interesting sort of sideboarding, pre-boarding decisions. So I think learning as much as possible, gathering as much information as possible to have the most rounded sort of experience during testing, so that you can have the best plans and the most well-rounded plans is super conducive to good results. The other thing I kind of just want to add as well is I think preparing early, like knowing what you're going to play early, that's been my biggest learning over the last 2 years. The events that I've done the best in, I've locked my hero early. I've tried to understand the meta. I've tried to understand what I think is just the best deck for the format, or what I perceive to be the best deck to give me the best chance, and just locking that hero and just learning it inside and out. And shout out to Nick for being my Oldhim sensei on this one, because I had not played a lot of Oldhim before this. So.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned that you felt extremely prepared walking into every matchup. How did you all go about formulating those game plans to get that level of preparation? Just talk a little bit about that process.
I can briefly sort of say what I did. I mean, we talked about this. Nick can probably give a bit more insight on kind of the discussions of the matchups. But I just tried to play a game into everything kind of the week before. So I got between Dan and Nick and some other friends here locally, got to play like basically against every single matchup, I think, apart from maybe like Arachne and I think Icelander, but played against basically everything else, maybe Dory as well. But yeah, that helped a lot for me, for instance.
Yeah. Oldhim is really good for that, because as I said, you don't need a win con against a lot of these rogue decks like Dorinthia. They need to beat you. So like, if you just play nice and you just play your cards efficiently, you're just super favored against them either way. So it doesn't take that many games to figure out like the nuances to those other niche matchups. Then there's matchups like Kano where you just sign the slip and just walk off, but like everything else is fine.
Yeah. What is your philosophy behind Sigil of Solace, Nick?
It's so
go for it, Nick. Go for it. Come on.
I said this to Hayden and he thought it was good, but it's kind of reminds me of something like Ultra Marathon. So in Ultra Marathon, where you're going 200 miles, 300 miles, a disgusting amount of miles in a race, women in an Ultra Marathon will slowly over time catch up to men in these races over hundreds of miles, and then eventually overtake them. Just a genetic factor. I don't know exactly how it works, but slowly over time they'll gradually catch up over hundreds of miles. So with Sigil of Solace, this is like math where you can't really calculate it, because you gaining 3 life is not the same as someone else gaining 3 life, because you will never run out of deck. And they will always run out of threats, because you will always be able to pitch hard or Earth React, Rampart, Crown of Seeds. You gaining 3 life is more annoying than them attacking you with a Scarf or a Scar, because they're going to run out of cards. You're going to keep pitching forever. You will never run out of cards. And then you will attack for 4 with the weapon. So say Briar comes in with Rites of Replenishment for 6. Because you're always blocking for 5, they need to have 4 times more life than you to actually beat you. And that's just never going to happen where that's the case, because if you're on 10 and they're on 40, that's the only way that combo even beats you. So if you're gaining 3 life, the longer the game goes, the more your life is going to matter incrementally, because they're going to run out of cards in their deck. And so Sigil of Solace just really helps with that game plan. It also just says, when you go first, gain 3 life. Thanks for coming. See you later. Mm-hmm. Easy turn 1.
How does this sort of deck building philosophy extend to other cards, or at least the way you differentiate yourself on how you view cards when it comes to things like Terra Sunder, Rouse the Ancients, and Disable Red? Do you think that you think about these cards differently than other people do?
Probably not anymore. Everyone knows that Rouse the Ancients is just a stupid card where like it actually just goes against LSS's philosophy of, yeah, you run out of blues in your deck, you run out of reds in your deck, and then you're weaker when you have blues. And it's like, no, my 4-card hand does 13 damage and I still get to arsenal a card with Rouse the Ancients. It's just ridiculous. But I mean, I think Disable is just another one where it's 3 for 9 instead of like the math of like Wounded Bulls are 2 for 8. Why would I play a 3 for 9? That's stupid. That's not good math. You know, that's it. You get to attack them. They block with multiple cards. They're going to run out of cards in their deck because they have to get rid of cards out of you. It's not like a real numbers game. It's a numbers game in terms of my deck size versus their deck size. I don't know. I can't. I'm not good at explaining stuff. I hope people understand.
It's a bit full circle, right? Like, I mean, we talk about this, somewhat on hit focused philosophy, and just looking at cards like Disable and thinking about your punish strategy and forcing them to interact with you and thinking that's a good concept. Where I think for a bit in Fab we sort of came into this new age of thought where it's like it's literally just a number, right? It's if I have one more quantitative value in my card than you do, it doesn't matter what the text is. That is just better. And it seems like we're coming back around to now actually considering the nuance of some of these cards and how they affect the matchup, how your opponent has to respond to them in the specific situation that you present. Hayden, you were saying something.
Yeah, no, I think it reminds me a lot of playing sort of Welcome to Wraith Fab a little bit. You're trading cards for value. a Disable, for instance, can buy 3 cards, right, for your 1 card, and that can matter. You can get that value back. It's not like Nick was saying, it's not a 2 for 8. It's not a 3 for 13 in terms of these cards. It's a 3 for 9. But it is a card that, if you're playing these cards because they must be blocked. So the on-hit effect, it's hard to quantify what the value of that effect is in any given turn cycle of the game. But at some point, because of something, what Nick was saying, basically the length of these games, often with a deck like Oldhim, you're going to get that value back. You're going to find it elsewhere. It's going to force your opponent to either, lose reds in deck. You see this against something like Lexi. It's like they have 2 less red arrows in the deck, for instance, which is important. That will buy you a turn later in the game where they now have to be more conservative on their deck size or their threat density, because they're going to run out of threats. So maybe that means they have to take a turn off to Remembrance, or to use the quiver, or whatever it is, or, be able to present less damage, and then that gives you another window to present another on-hit effect, another bit of damage. So it's all kind of cyclical, and it's quite interesting. And I think there's a lot of decks like this in Flesh and Blood in certain ways, and I think we're going to see more of them because of the power level of the current sets we're seeing. So this kind of dip we've seen from Monarch and Tales of Aria to Dynasty, Outsiders, even Uprising to an extent. I think Fi has some of this built into it with the idea of the Phoenix Flame, for instance. I think Icelander has a bit of this with the value you get on Frostbites, for instance, with the blue cards in your deck. So I think there's heroes other than Oldhim that already have this, and we're going to see more of it. I think even the Assassins, particularly Azuri, has this to a degree as well with the weapons. So and codexes, etc. So I think it's quite an interesting philosophy. I think we're going to see a lot of it as we move through Flesh and Blood.
Well, I mean, that begs the follow-up question: is how, with the way that you all have approached and thought about Oldhim, how would you extrapolate this to other heroes in the future as we see Oldhim rotate out? Nick specifically, I know you sort of had, you've been known for some things in deck building, right? Like previously, Flock of the Featherwalkers and Dorinthia. Like, how are you going to take your approach to deck building, and how do you plan to extrapolate it to the future heroes of Flesh and Blood with the addition of Dusk Till Dawn and the rotation of Oldhim?
It's all contextual of what that hero's strengths are. Oldham's strength is, I will never run out of cards in deck, and you will. So there's a deck threatening aspect to that hero. So you can't just take that to a hero that doesn't have a weapon or something and say, oh well, I'm gonna apply the same principle when it doesn't really work that way. I think decks like Dory are really strong at actually threatening, and Assassin are really strong at the Oldhim threatening your deck. Type of aspect of the game. So that's a way Oldhim players can maybe move on. But I just play what's good, to be honest. So I'll just figure out something else. It's all about the strength of that hero, right? Every hero has a strength. I think the issue with First Blood is some of the weaker heroes, their strengths are the same as another hero's strengths, but that hero's strengths are like up here and they're like down here. So there's literally no reason to ever play this hero.
Yeah.
And so like
Bravo,
that's
for sure.
Yeah.
What is there any heroes like that you specifically have your eye on right now as Oldhim leaves and Dusk Till Dawn comes back in? Now, we've seen the spoiler for the new Prism, we've seen the spoiler for the new Shadow Runeblade, but is there anything you have your eye on? Like, what is getting you excited?
Definitely not those 2 heroes.
I know, right?
Because there's not that many spoilers out yet. I can't really answer that, and there's no ban list, so you're literally going in blind. So maybe I'll watch someone's tier list of Oldham's rotating out, and maybe get an idea from that, even though there's no information about what the format's going to be.
Yeah,
I would say from a philosophy standpoint, I know Nick has expressed to me that he thinks that Assassin is interesting, at least.
Yeah. I love Azuri. She's so much fun, and the fact that Codex into Leave No Witnesses off 1 card is like probably the most powerful thing off a 1 card hand. So good.
All right, I'm gonna ask maybe a hard question and maybe a bad question as well, but it's honestly, I want to know the answer. Is how would you define what does value mean in Flesh and Blood? How do you define that?
I don't know.
Is that because it's a bad question or it's a hard question?
Pitcher blue, attack with Findle's Fighting Spirit, gain 1 life, attack for 7. That's math. That's that goat milk right there.
Yeah, because I think we saw, like we were talking about earlier, we saw a paradigm shift away from things like on-hit triggers or synergistic cards to just raw, sort of expressed attack value. And it's just, I'm wondering if that is actually the future of Flesh and Blood, or if we take into these more nuanced approaches to some cards, like adding in things like Red Disable, or maybe fundamentals in the sense of having these these blues that break sort of the core tenets of the game, right? Something like Rousey Ancient, something like Terra Sunder. Like the cards are just very, very powerful, but also the sort of dual utilization as being optimal pitch cards as well.
I feel like I can give you an answer that I think levels your question, Brendan.
Okay.
And this is something I thought a lot about recently. I've actually talked to Nick about this as well, is that it so depends. Like there's so many different aspects to that, I guess, of answers to that question. So one is Nick talked about strengths of a hero, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's a big part that plays into it. Like value on some heroes is a real strength, right? Some heroes have way better on-rate blues than others. We saw Icelander with this, and that also lends itself to be able to play a more value-based game because you get value. And people talk about, Wounded Bull, Finals Fighting Spirit, E-Strike, Scar, whatever, the rate of an Aether Ice Vein fuse, for instance.
Mm-hmm.
What they don't talk about is like the value of a Frostbite. What people seem to forget often is Storm Striders is broken. There's other aspects to it as well. And other heroes, Lexi, for instance, is a lot more synergistic than anything we've seen in the past sort of 2 formats, really. Like it is really based around your best turns for pushing damage involve cards like Rainrazor's 3 of a Kind, Codex turns, like Art of War, even if people are playing that card. Like there are different strengths for different heroes. And I think that question is... I get the question. Like it seems like a pretty straightforward question. Like what is value? But my view, and because Nick just said not sure he can answer it. In my view, the value is so context dependent on the hero and also the meta that we sit in as well.
I feel like we don't know how to define it, but we know it when we see it, and it's like the worst the worst way to talk about something on a podcast. But
there's a lot of like wasted some small value, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like even Lexi has the best yellows are terrible. But Lexi has the most insane yellows, and she can function off yellows, so she can make a second cycle out of yellow cards and just kill you, or just play them straight out. And it has everyone says Art of War, 3 of a Kind, Rainrazor turn, hit the feature on the pokies. Like that's what the Aussies call it anyway. It's just that's value where you get to play insane yellows and function with those yellows because a lot of decks don't have good blues. That's why Icelander and Oldhim was so good for so long, is that their blues are crazy and they're hyper consistent. That's why people chose to play them.
Well, that was actually my next question is how do you value consistency in something like Flesh and Blood? Like, is it very important to you? Do you seek out consistent decks? Do you think that they're objectively better than inconsistent decks, etc.?
Yeah, I think they are.
Yeah.
It's just...
What defines a consistent deck in Flesh and Blood?
Lots of block 3s, lots of cards that synergize with each other, and strong blues. So, like, if your blues... That's what I love about blues. Your blues should synergize with other blues. So when you draw all blues, you can still do something. Whereas like Icelander can do that. Icelander can pitch a blue, play Insidious attack for 2, Arsenal pass, or they can play in their opponent's turn, get value off a channel like Frigid or something. Oldhim can attack for 8. It's not great, but it's better than any other deck can do with blues, or it can Terra Sunder you. It's super consistent in that way. Whereas like a lot of other decks, you play like an aggro deck and you draw all blues, you're just like, ugh. It's like a really bad taste. It's awful. Like 5/4 blues. Like you just lose.
I wonder if that is like a core ideology that we can extend moving forward to look for future broken cards and synergies. Is just look for cards that are maybe primarily or secondarily resource cards, but then also have a strong effect when used as sort of an attacking card. Right? Just look for cards that sort of break the paradigm of having a single utilization. Is that the backbone of what makes some decks much more powerful than others?
I think so. I actually suggested suspend Rousey Ancients, but this was before Oldhim was Living Legend, just until other decks got better blues, because all these rogue decks they're like Rhinar blues. Oh, forget about it. Dorinthia blues. Shit. Katsu blues, I mean, they're okay. They pitch their 0 and they discard and they flick flack and this and that, but like, I hate them.
Yeah.
And like, you go through a deck and it's like, if you go to build a new deck and it's like, okay, let's put all the blues I want. You go through the deck when you finish making the blues, like, oh, there's like 7 blues in here or 6 blues. It's like, that's not great.
Cheerios Briar, right? no blues, right? No pitching cards. So it doesn't have supporting resource cards. Every card is a gas card. And if you're turning if you're playing something like Oldhim and your blue cards are also those gas cards like Rousey Ancients, where you're having these, critically high levels of attack when you're able to draw back into them, or things like Terra Thunderwood, dominate, not hit effects. Like other decks and other heroes just don't do that, right? And that's just a very powerful thing to be doing. Anyway, let's talk about the event specifically, because we've been doing a lot of theories. So you went into day 252, so a solid record, but pretty, it's kind of tough to start day 2 for sure. What were your 2 losses, first of all, and talk to me about how they happened and why? Was there anything you could have done better, or just expand upon that?
I lost to Azalea round 2.
Okay.
I said to myself, this guy looks like a death. This guy doesn't look like a dread borer. He just doesn't. He looks like a typical death dealer, draw my cards, have a great time kind of gamer. And I said, I'm going to play Anatos anyway, just because, I don't know. And then he just flipped death dealer, had like the most greedy, like loose to older deck ever. Like, anyway, I just got destroyed. Unlucky. And then,
the other match. Yeah. How was the other match?
Yeah, I lost to a great Oldhim player. What can you say? My only Oldhim loss ever. And I don't know. I just did not play well. My pummels were stuck with blue staunch, and then I would just forget that I pitched pummel, and then I would just pitch the blue staunch, and this happened like 3 times, and I would just draw it. I'm like, oh my god, what the fuck?
And then, how did you approach day 2 going in with the X2 record? What was your mentality? Did your game plan switch at all, or did you just kind of hunker down and play tight?
I have to shout out my friend Ash. He has always said the saying where, just take play. Who cares? Just play and enjoy it. Mm-hmm. It doesn't matter the result. Whatever. You just play the game. It is what it is. Go to if you lose, you go to the next event. Just play the game. All good. And I just took that mentality, because after day 1, I was like, 5-2, I have to win 4 in a row or 5 in a row. Like, that's not going to happen. I'm just playing kind of loose. And then day 2, I played some Bravo guy. I don't remember his name, sorry. And it was pretty simple. Bravo's a pretty easy matchup. And then, like, after that, I was just in the mental zone of just playing the game. Wasn't even thinking about losing. I just played really well. I was remembering my pitch stack, and I was pitching well, using all my cards efficiently. And then, I just won all my games. And then to get into the last round, all of a sudden I'm locked into the top cut, and it's like, oh, cool.
Mm-hmm. How important is memorizing the pitch stack when playing something like Oldhim, and how detailed does your memorization need to be? Are you clustering like certain non-impactful cards, and then maybe sequencing an impactful card, and then again clustering like say 5 unimpactful? Or are you literally remembering every single card?
Oh no, I don't remember every single card. I'm not a magician, I just think I always go with I know what the last 3 cards I pitched are, so I'm going to pitch this, or I know what the last card I pitched is, so I'm going to pitch like this. Or if I see my opponent, like in the finals, my opponent pitched Rain Razors, Art of War, Lightning Surge, Winter's White. I'm like, well, that's a bad that's a bad hand. Like, even if you draw them separated, I'm going to on-hit you on this turn, and then that's what happened. And then, but if you see that their pitch is a certain way, because you're going to draw your pitch stack faster than them, you can just pitch like an on-hit against their like strong pitch stack turn. Or mostly I like to just say, okay, well, in a proactive matchup, okay, I pitched Rousey Ancients, and I'm going to prioritize putting an 8 power to the bottom, or like putting it with 8 powers, and then not putting a defense react with it. Sometimes you have no choice, but sometimes it just be that way. Mm-hmm. That's usually what I go for. And then when I remember like a 4 or 5 cards, and then I'll refresh, and then I'll start a new stack in my head.
Yeah.
So that's pretty much how I go.
What was the matchup you least wanted to face on the weekend?
Kano.
Okay, let's say outside of the outlier, outside of Kano, were there any other potential bad matchups?
Control Dash.
Okay, yeah. like the tree fog
bomber. That's a suicide bomber deck.
Yeah, I know. It just auto loses to some other things in the field. You're talking about the tree fog version, right? I think it's colloquially named over here.
Yeah, it's a terrible name, but
I agree.
Well, we're pushing that agenda here. What was your hardest match of the weekend?
Probably against one of the blue pitch guys. His name's Pudding. They're all so good. It's crazy how good those guys are. It literally came down to time was getting called. He's on 8. I just have pummel in my arsenal, and time's getting caught, and like I go attack, and because we're playing fast, he just says no blocks, and I just pummel him to cheese it. Like that's literally how it went. This was like the round before the bubble onto top 8. So like, it was just fortunate that like we're just playing fast, and he just says no blocks because he wants to get his turn in to try and kill me, and I just pummel from arsenal to be that way. He's on 8 exact, so unfortunate.
So
he was a good sport.
What's I think I kind of know the answer, but what's next for Mr. Nick Butcher after the calling Singapore win? Just more fab, or are we found the opening fab school? Like what the hell, dude? It's been like 2 years.
Whatever. Like if people don't get it, people don't want it. I don't know who cares. Anyway, moving on. Just lots of Monarch drafting, getting ready for nationals. Lots of new cards coming out, which is going to be fun.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah. There's not much going on before nationals anywhere in the world, really. So,
well, you have World Championships to look forward to, and those will be in. Oh, shit, we don't know.
Those will be somewhere at some time before December 15th.
Hayden, anything you want to mention in addition from the weekend?
No, I mean, it was a great weekend. It was awesome to hang out with cool people. I mean, the Singaporean local community is amazing. So I know Nick experienced it as well. The people there are so cool and great to spend time with friends and play fab. I mean, I'm trying to convince Nick to come to Taipei after nationals. That's the next goal.
It's a cool spot. Yeah, I mean, just wait till we start going to Japan. That'll be something else. I genuinely can't wait for it. I'm very jealous that you all live in that part of the world. We were able to go to the tournaments in Asia.
You live in America. You get an event every second.
You do get a lot of events over here. I think that your locations are a lot cooler though.
That's true.
Yeah, it is just true, to be honest. Definitely.
Singapore versus Baltimore.
Yeah, definitely. Nick, where can people find you? What are your socials?
They can't find me. I'm nowhere.
Sure, you have Twitter. So. You don't even have Twitter, do you? No, you posted that. No, you're on Twitter. You posted that.
He does have Twitter. His handle's down below him, so he can't escape.
Yeah, you can't escape. The humility is just too much. Awesome, Nick. Well, we really appreciate you coming on. It's always great to get behind, get inside the mind of a master, especially when it comes to something like Oldhim. And I think that you definitely gave us some sort of wisdom that we can take forth into future sets as Oldhim rotates out, as Dustle Dawn comes in, and apply that to future deck building to find sort of the next best deck. And obviously yourself, Hayden, Matt, just that group of players has just been killing tournaments. So definitely doing something right. I know a lot of other very good players showed up to that tournament, didn't have quite the same result.
We're no Michael Hamilton, but we do all right.
Yeah, not yet. But again, thank you so much for coming on. Congratulations once again on becoming the calling champion here at Singapore last weekend. And just going to do a little housekeeping here, which is if you're listening to this on audio platforms, there's a video version on YouTube at youtube.com/ArsenalPass. We are all on Twitter. I'm at Brendan APG. Hayden is at Fien_Dale. And as I flip over to OBS, Nick is at Nick Butcher Fab. So go follow him. And yeah, if you listen to this podcast, you listen to it every week, you like it, you maybe been following us for a couple of years and you haven't left us a review, definitely do that. That's the number one thing you can do to help us out. Apple Podcasts is preferred, but everything helps. And finally, check out the Arsenal Pass Patreon for deck techs, deck guides. And there's going to be a lot of content in preparation as we lead up to Worlds, whenever the hell that is. But thank you all so much for listening. We'll see you next week.